Hello everyone. Today we'll be discussing about the class relationship solution for the Hackerearth Python assessment held on May 13th. First question is one-to-one relationship. Brinda has recently joined a company and she is working as a software engineer. She was associated with a project to work on relationships. To get hold of the topic, she starts writing a code where she takes the details of her colleagues and displays them in an ordered way. Let's help Brinda to complete her code. And we have to complete this without using super keyword. Now we have to create a user class with the following attributes: name, age and gender. Age is an integer. Then you have to use the constructor to initialize the variables with respect to the class. Then we have to create another class called contact with phone number, email ID, address and user. So the fourth member is a user object. So that is why the data type is given as user. So while implementing it, we will find it how we are going to use the user object. So this user object is where the one-to-one relationships come. Now both the classes should have the str method. So double underscore str double underscore method is a special method that will return a string representation of the object. So based on the given output format, we will modify that method. So we have to create two separate classes, user and contact, which does not extend the user class. And we have to use str method in both the classes, and we have to strictly adhere to the object-oriented specifications given in the problem statement. And all the class names, attributes, method name should be as specified in the problem statement. Now coming to the input, the first line contains the string name, the second line contains the age, the third line contains gender, which are basically the user details, fourth line contains the phone number, fifth line email ID, and the last line the address, which are the contact details of the user. And finally the output, we have to refer the input output format for better understanding, and instructions strictly have to use one-to-one relationship. So look at the input and output, both are same, but the way the implementation is different. So let us see how to implement this. So we'll dive into the solution now. So first we have to create a class called user. So class user, and the attributes of the class are name, age and gender. So let me create the constructor: init self name, age, gender, and self dot name equal to name, self dot age equal to age, self dot gender equal to gender. That's it. So we have created the constructor. Next is we have to implement the str method. Since both the classes should have str method, so we have to define it here also. And as I said earlier in my previous discussions, any method that has a double underscore prefixed and suffixed with it, it is a special method. They are also called as magic methods. So this str method also has a special meaning, which we'll find out soon in this problem. So this str method, basically it will not accept any parameter and it will have a single return statement. That return statement will have the values that are the attributes of the class. So that single return statement will return the attributes of a class. So here the user class has three attributes: name, age and gender. So this str method should return the name, age and gender of the user class in the specified format. So there are plenty of ways you can return the values, but here each value is displayed on a new line if you take a look at the output. Hence we will just print the name, age and gender directly. So for that I'm going to use a string format. So curly braces, The first curly braces is for the name, followed by a new line, then for age, followed by a new line, then the gender. Dot format of, then you have to give a tuple of values. So self dot name, self dot age, and self dot gender. That's it. So that's all about the str method. So it will just return the values in the given format, and it is a special method. So self dot name, the value will be replaced while we are accessing that method, and the slash n, it is the new line because it is given in the output format. So first curly braces will have the name, the second curly braces will have the age, finally the gender respectively. Now coming to the next class, contact. So class contact, it has 4 attributes: phone number, email ID, address, and user. So I'm going to use the constructor. So def init self phone number as per the given conditions. So phone number, email ID, address, and user. And you can use self to initialize them. So self dot phone number is equal to phone number, self dot email ID, email ID equal to email ID, self dot address is equal to address, self dot user is equal to user. So this self dot user can be directly thought of like a normal instance variable, and you can assign it, so there is no wrong in it. So phone number, email ID, address, they are all string, whereas the user is user object. Next we have to create the str method again for contact class. So here it is going to return the values, but in which format? For that we have to refer the output. So first the output, it prints the user details, Carlos 25 and male, then followed by the contact number, email address, and the address. So here self.user can be used. So when I am invoking self.user, which means I am invoking the user object, so then this is where the one-to-one relationship comes. A contact class has one user, so one user can have one contact, and vice versa, one contact can have one user. So that is where your one-to-one relationship comes. So this is where we have implemented the one-to-one relationship. Now we can use this user object to access the user values, name, age, and gender. So let us see how we can implement the str method. So it needs 4 values: user value, then the phone number, email address, finally the address. So format, so when you take a look at the output, first the user details are getting printed, so I'm invoking the user value, so self.user, self.user, which means, see, Carlos 25, male, then you comes your contact number, email ID, and the address. So self.user will in turn invoke the user class str method, which you will find out soon enough. Next comes your phone number, then comes your address, no, I think the email address, so self.email id, then finally your address. That's it. And I believe I have missed out a curly brace. Yes, we have implemented both the classes. Now let us create the user object. So this str method and this str method both are implemented. Now coming to the input format, the first line contains the name, the second line the age, the third line the gender, which means the user detail. So we have to create an user object. So user object, so user equal to user of input of, which is the name, int of input of, which is the age, then input of, which is the gender. Now we have created the user object. Then the fourth line, fifth line and sixth line. The fourth line contains the phone number, and now we have to create the contact object 456. And contact object has the phone number, email id and address. So contact is equal to contact of, fourth line is the phone number, which is an integer, so int of input of, then you have email id, and then you have the address, both are strings. And finally there is a fourth parameter that is missing, which is the user. So that user is the one that you have created in the first line. So that user object is the object that will be passing it to the contact. So you cannot create a contact object without creating an user. So now I can create the contact object. Now the contact object is complete with the user object. Now that user object will be assigned to that particular user, and the self.user will get the values of all the user details, which we have read it. Now I'm going to display the output. So print, if you take a look at the output format, it is just printing the user details and the values. So that is where your str method comes into play. This str method is a special method that will be invoked whenever you are printing the object, similar to your init method, which will be invoked implicitly while creating an object. This str method will be invoked implicitly whenever you are printing or returning an object. So if I'm going to print contact, since contact is an object, so I'm going to print contact, this will trigger the str method by default. So there is no need to manually invoke the magic methods. Now let us check whether it is working properly or not by running and checking the problem with sample input that is given in the question. So here the self.user again in turn triggers the str method that is in the user class. So here I am returning self.user, which means that will trigger the str method of user class. So that will get replaced by name, age and gender. So this name, age and gender will be replaced in that particular line, then followed by the phone number, email id and the address. So that is what given in the sample input. So now let us copy this sample input and check whether our program works perfectly. I'm going to run it, open the console, I'm going to paste the input. Yes, I'm getting the output. So how am I getting the output? So first are the user details getting printed and then the contact details. So how is it possible? It is because of the str method being triggered. So I'm nowhere I have directly invoked the str method, just printed the object. So that str method will trigger the user's str method, and user's str details will be printed, which is the name, age and gender, and finally the phone number, email ID and address. So this is one-to-one relationship. I believe that you have understood the one-to-one relationship. And the output. So the user details comes first, then the contact number, email address and the address. So the str method of the user is triggered implicitly. It is triggered implicitly by the contact class. Now let us dive into the second question. It is about one-to-many relationship. So let's get more practice in one-to-many relationship between the classes. Eventually they will be used a lot in our applications, and they are very common for any applications. A good application should maintain any relationship among the domains if there exists one. So consider a user, he may own many number of halls. So one user can have many halls. That is where your one-to-many relationship exists here. Let's implement this scenario in action. So let us see how to implement one-to-many relationship in this problem. We have to create a user class with name, contact number and hall list, and the hall list is a list of hall objects. So take a look at the data type there. Then it has another method called add to hall list. This method accepts a parameter which is a hall object, and it will append the hall to the hall list of the particular user. That will be made clear when we are in the implementation of this solution. Then you have to create another class called hall with name, cost per day and owner name. And it also has another method called display, and this will display the owner name, hall name and cost per day, and strictly adhere to the object-oriented specifications given in the problem statement. All the class names, attribute names and method names should be the same. Now coming to the input format. First input consists of the number of users and user details, followed by the number of halls and the hall details. And output, if the hall exists, then you have to print the username and the hall details. If there is no halls available, then you have to print no hall available. We can refer the sample output for formatting specifications. Now let us dive into the solution. So we'll create a class user, and it has 3 attributes: name, contact number and hall list. So def init self name, contact number, comma hall list. Self dot name is equal to name, self dot contact number equal to contact number, self dot hall list equal to hall list. Now we have a method called add to hall list. Def add to hall list self. This method takes a hall object as a parameter and adds the hall to the hall list. So let it be hall, the hall object, and we have to add this hall object to the hall list. So hall list is a list, so we have to use the append method. So self dot hall list dot append, that will do. So self dot hall list dot append of that particular hall. So this will add this hall to the hall list. That's it. Now we will create the second class, which is hall. So class hall, it has owner name, name and cost per day. So def init self comma owner name comma name comma cost per day. Now we have to assign them. So self dot owner name equal to owner name, self dot name is equal to name, and self dot cost per day is equal to cost per day. Then it has a display method which will display the owner name and hall details. So def display self. So display in which format we have to print it. So in the output we can see that the owner name, the hall name and the cost per day is getting printed. So in that order we should display the details. So print self dot, now we can also use the same way that we have print. So I'm going to use the format method here also. So in any way you can print. So now I'm going to use the format method. So curly brace new line, curly brace new line, curly brace, then dot format. Now I'm going to pass a tuple of values, which is self dot owner name, self dot name and the cost per day. Yes, now we have completed both the classes. Now like input format, the first n input consists of the number of users and the next input provides the user details. So n is equal to int of input of, which is the number of users, which is an integer. Then the next input provides n user details. So for I in range of n, we have to create user objects. So user is equal to user of, the first value of the user will be the name, then contact number. And if you take a look at the input, the name and contact number are alone given. There is no hall list being passed. Now how can we create an object, user object, without the hall list? See, only name and contact number is given. So let us first implement it. So input of, which is the name, comma int of input of, which is the contact number, comma I'm going to pass an empty hall list. Since there is no hall list being passed, so we have to pass an empty hall list. Open and close square bracket will do, and that will correspond to an empty list in Python. So now we have created the user object, and there will be more number of users. So when we have more number of users, we have to create a user list. So user list is equal to an empty list. Now I'm going to append this newly created user to the list. So user underscore list dot append of user. So now this will append all the users and it will create a list of users, and all the users will have an empty hall list. Now coming to the next line. So next input corresponds to the number of halls. So let it be halls. So halls halls is equal to int of input of so that is the number of halls. And for I in range of halls, now we have to create hall object. So how can we create a hall object? It has owner name, name, and cost per day. So if you take a look at the output, 4 corresponds to the number of halls, and first one is the owner name, and the next one is the hall name and the cost per day. Owner name, hall name, cost per day. So hall is equal to hall object, so hall of input of, that is the owner name, then finally the name of the hall and the cost per day, which is an integer, so int of input of. Now we have created the hall. Now we have to add this hall to the hall list of the owner. Okay, look at the sample input. So you have Alden, who is the user, and in the hall details you can also find Alden, and it provides the n number of hall that is available, and if there is no hall available, you have to print it as no hall available. So let us check whether a hall is available for a user. So we have to make use of the add to hall list method. So this method is used to add a particular hall to a particular user if that user is the owner of that particular hall. So we have the list of users with us. Now we have to use this list of users and check whether the owner name matches with that of the name, and if it matches, then we will add that to the hall list. So for user in user list, if user dot name is equal to hall dot owner name. So if the owner name of the hall matches with the name of the user, which means he is the owner of that particular hall. If it is matches, then you have to add that hall to the user's hall list. So how can I add it? Since we have passed in an empty list, we have to append the value, the hall, to that list. So how can I append it? We will see. User dot, we have to make use of the add to hall list method that is available in the user class. So let us see how we can use that particular object. So if you take a look at the sample input, you have the name Alden, then the contact number, then we have 4 halls, and in the third hall you have the name Alden. So Alden is an owner of Justin Hall, and the cost per day is also given. So Alden, this Alden matches with that of the user. So that is where our comparison takes place. So if that is matching, then you have to add the hall Justin Hall to the user Alden. So we are going to implement it in our program. The other users Nelson and Ronnie does not have the hall. Now let us add the particular user. If that username matches with the owner name, user dot add to hall list of that particular hall. So you can invoke that method. So if that particular user is the owner of that particular hall, add him to the hall list. That's it. That is what we are doing it here. So user dot add to hall list of the hall object. Then if that user is getting added, then finally you have to break from the loop, else the for loop will go on continuously. So after adding the user, break out from the loop. Then we have added the halls to the user. Now we have to check the output. So in the output, if a hall is available, you have to print the hall details. If there is no hall available, then there is no hall available. That message should be printed. So the input contains 3 users, Alden, Nelson and Ronnie. If Alden has a hall allocated to him, then you have to print the details of Alden Hall. So Alden, and the hall name is Justin Hall, and the cost per day. Whereas Nelson and Ronnie, they don't have any hall allocated to them. Hence, the output is no hall available. No hall available. Now let us implement it. So for that, we have to make use of the hall list that is available in the user class. So every user will have a hall list. If one particular user has an empty hall list, then that means he or she has no hall allocated to them. So let us do it. For user in user list, if there are plenty of ways you can use to check whether list is empty or not. Here I'm going to use the length. So if the length of the list is equal to 0, which means it is empty. If it is not equal to 0, that means the user has a particular hall allocated to him. So if it is equal to 0, then it's empty. If it is not equal to 0, then that particular user has a hall allocated to him. So for printing that hall, since it is a list, again you have to use a for loop. So I'm going to use a for loop. So for hall in user dot hall list, you have to print the hall. For that, you have the display method of hall. How am I able to access the display method? Because every hall in the hall list is a hall object. So hall object has a method called display, which we created. So that is how I'm able to access the display method directly, because the class hall has a display method and we have to print the owner name and cost per day. So that is why I'm able to display it. So hall dot display will do. So that means that particular user has a hall. What is the else condition? So if the length of the hall list is indeed 0, that means there is no hall available for that particular user. So print double quotes no hall available. Now this hall list, it is again a list of hall objects. So if that is empty, then that means that particular user does not have a hall allocated to him. So that users in the user list, if that particular user has a hall allocated to him, then we are going to display that hall by using the for loop and the display method that is available. And if there is no hall available, that means the length will be 0, and else we are printing the no hall available. So that display method will invoke and it will print the following details. That is how we are implementing this program. Now let us run this program. Okay, run this program, and I'm going to copy the sample input. So first I'm going to copy the user details. So there are 3 users, Alden, Nelson, Ronnie. Then I'm going to copy the hall details. Yeah, I'm getting the output. So look at this. Alden is allocated a hall, Justin Hall. See, Alden, Nelson and Ronnie, they don't have any halls available to them, and they are not owners of any halls. Hence I'm getting the output as no hall available. So I believe we have understood the solution for this particular problem. So thank you for joining the discussion.